Anita, Mohammed, so excited that you can join me on a very difficult topic that we're going to be addressing today, homelessness in Canada. So Anita, I'll start with you because people have also all these sorts of misconceptions about homelessness. One misconception is that people who are homeless are there by choice. How would you respond to that claim?
So thank you for having us here today.
You're
We're
very
happy
welcome.
to be here. Homelessness is a very complex issue, and it is something that sometimes is hidden and invisible in our community. And there are often many paths that lead to homelessness, whether it is loss of job, marital breakdown, health issues. And in fact, when we look at the research that we have done into homelessness and what it looks like, it is often, there are three sort of critical points that are, that can lead someone to homelessness, whether, as I said, the loss of job or health. It could be discharge from hospital when people are leaving hospital and they require support and care and they don't have that. Or leaving corrections, or when children age out of foster care at 18. Mm-hmm. Those are very vulnerable pathways that can lead to homelessness. And so those are the kinds of things that we have to look at when we're looking at supports for homelessness and how to support individuals and families across our neighborhoods and in our community. Mm-hmm. We know that, if I can share some data with you about what homelessness looks like, we know that across the GTA there are over 116,000 people that are struggling to afford to keep a roof over their head. On any given night there are 30,000 individuals that can be homeless. And those are the things that we can see, but as I was saying, sometimes homelessness is invisible as well. There are people who we have heard live in their cars because they can't afford a home, but they have a job, and so they're using the car to get to work because mm-hmm. that's an important part of their survival, but that's also where they're living mm-hmm. Because of that. We also know that housing unaffordability is huge, and in fact the GTA is the capital in terms of housing unaffordability across Canada, and so it becomes sometimes a choice, not a very not a choice that anybody wants to make, but it's about how will I survive and what do I need to do, and a house and a roof over our heads sometimes is the most challenging part of it. Mm-hmm.
Mohammed, sometimes when people see people, lying on the streets, maybe lying on a grate on a cold winter day, they think this is a person's choice. This person doesn't want to go to a shelter, doesn't want to find a way, to solve their own problem. How would you respond to that sort of allegation?
I think that's completely unfair. I think people end up homeless for many, many reasons. I know some people who, when you're living paycheck to paycheck, and all of a sudden you lose your job, or there's a downsizing in the factory that you worked in for 20 years, and the skill set that you have is what you've been doing for 20 years, and then it's hard to find a job, and then your family starts breaking down, and then you end up either divorced or whatnot, or maybe even losing your kids, and people fall. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people fall for a lot of different reasons, and it's not just about mental health. It's not just about the lack of opportunity. It's not about. It's like life has circumstances, mm-hmm. and getting up sometimes is harder than we imagine it to be. Mm-hmm. Especially in the winter, it's incredibly painful to see, because unfortunately here in Toronto, we're almost expected to hear, okay, this person died, or another person died in the cold, in the winter, and it's really painful to see. How we're constantly having to be one step behind, and never really catching up to be able to help people in their most desperate times. Mm-hmm,
mm-hmm. If I could add to that too, I think that people who find themselves in those circumstances are often dealing with a lot of trauma, and mm-hmm. so things like job loss and unable to afford a house or a home or an apartment are certainly parts of that. But there's also a lot of pain that individuals are going through, whether it was through childhood trauma or abuse or grieving the death of someone that was close to them, mental illness or addictions, and that's trauma-based. That's very, it's a very, very complex issue for individuals that are going through those circumstances. And so it's sometimes, it's not a question of choice. It's about what that individual and the pain and the suffering that they're going through and what they're dealing with that has put them in that place.
So, Mohammed, you mentioned families. Some people think that the face of homelessness is white and male. It seems like you're suggesting that it's much bigger than that.
Of course, yeah. I think poverty is very racialized. It affects people who are newcomers. It affects not just white men. I think, and homelessness is an effect of poverty. And people are falling through the cracks all over the place, and I think that even within the Muslim community, there's a significant rise in child poverty. It happens because people are newcomers that are coming here with aspirations of success and integration are finding access to the middle class unattainable. Either that's credentials, not being able to find jobs, or whatever it might be, and that all those things lead to either people finding roots and being able to predict their futures and build, or sliding down. And people right now are sliding down right across the board.
So, Anita, to build on what Mohammed is saying, some people think, or some people say about the homeless, like, why are they so lazy? Why don't they just go and find a job and get up off their feet? How would you respond to that claim?
I think, again, there's a lot of misunderstanding. We have done a lot of research that looks at the issues of poverty and homelessness to understand the complexity of some of those issues. And as I was describing before, there are lots of reasons why somebody can find themselves homeless. Employment and housing are important parts of that, but it's a lot deeper than that. And sometimes, as we've done research that looked at precarity of jobs and income inequality, what we're also seeing is that, the paths that we thought would help us with a good quality of life, such as education and good jobs, those pathways aren't as accessible anymore, and that it really does matter in terms of age and gender and race as to what kinds of opportunities will be available to you and how you can how you survive, how you thrive, and those are some of the barriers that people face. But also in the depth of the issue, it is significant trauma or illness or mental health that individuals or addictions that people are facing that go beyond just, if you can just get a job. Some of it is about the access, the pathways that lead to a good job, and some of it is also about just the complexity that individuals are facing in terms of their own personal situation.
Mohammed, some people say, homelessness is impossible to solve. Do you think that's the case?
I think it's very difficult to solve, as is poverty. But I think that, we all have a role to play in it. And I think that first making people aware of what the issues are is important. It's important because people individually will take more responsibility for it, but it'll also make governments take more responsibility for it too. And it needs to be a collective approach to be able to address these things in a real, meaningful way, and provide the networks and the social infrastructure for people to. And we all have a role to play. The Muslim community has a role to play. The United Way has a role to play. The governments have a role to play. But I actually think that there's, at least within the Muslim community currently, which is a change from before, I think there's a greater sense of awareness. People are wanting to address local issues, more so than they previously. I think
there's more of an awareness of it, yes.
Yeah, and I think, you know, traditional fundraising within the Muslim community has always been, you know, sending money abroad to a crisis or a flood of some sort somewhere. But now you see partnerships between the Muslim Association of Canada and the United Way, where they came together and held a Jummah in Nathan Phillips Square, and they raised $100,000. But more importantly, they raised the issue within the community of how we need to take ownership of poverty, and how as a community we need to really come together, support the United Way, support the other initiatives and the agencies, and get involved with those agencies to be able to address it locally.
If I could add to
Sure,
that,
yes.
So United Way is the second largest funder after government in community-based supports that include supports for housing, for homelessness, for people who are homeless, and supports to help them. And the kind of sustainability that that provides to our agencies and community networks is really important, because that's an important part of the solution, right? Making sure that in our communities where we live, that people who need access to services, that those services are available, and that we start as early as possible in terms of prevention so that things don't spiral and become crisis, because those are a lot harder to deal with. But are there solutions for homelessness? Yes, absolutely. And United Way is really an important part of standing behind those solutions through the network of services that we provide across our communities. And so, as Mohammed was saying, our campaign in the community is really about, while it's a fundraising campaign, it's actually about building the capacity and making sure that we have that network of agencies that people can rely on day in and day out. This is not something that, you know, starts and ends over a 3-month period.
Yes.
These are issues that, you know, we are dealing with as a society in an ongoing way, and they require that infrastructure in our community. And that's an important part of the solution, is making sure that that infrastructure exists in the best way possible.
Yeah. Now, Mohammed, how can people help individuals who they see as homeless? I mean, we walk by them, and I noticed that a lot of people just ignore them. When I was living in downtown, I actually developed relationships with them, because I would walk past them every day, and you end up talking and, you know, asking, how was your day? You know, what are you doing? But, you know, what are people supposed to do? Some people think, I give to a soup kitchen, you know, we have shelters. Are those enough?
I think you can do as much as you possibly can. I think
some people create, you know, care packages and give to the homeless. What's the best way to approach it on an individual level?
I think taking ownership. Like you were saying, you develop relationships. That relationship could then, you know, if you saw them next time and you asked them, are you hungry? They could say yes.
Yes.
And then what would you do? You would obviously say, okay, here, let's go to Tim Hortons and get you something. I think many times people feel lonely, and they don't have anyone to talk to. And the more we talk to each other, the better the solutions that we come up with. So, in all honesty, treating people with empathy, and really hearing where they're at, and walking with them along that journey. I think people need people to walk along. And I think, you know, whether that's buying them a coffee, whether that's having a conversation, whether that conversation leads to something or to another thing, like, the interaction allows you the ability to find solutions. And every person is there for a different reason. And just finding out exactly where they're at and trying to figure out how you can be there with them is the best way.
That's so beautifully said, Mohammed. Anita, do you have anything else to add to what Mohammed has said?
I would agree. I think, you know, if you can, you know, support and give financially, that'd be great. If you can support United Way, because we have that network of agencies across the GTA.
I hope people
that's
watching
really
will
important.
support the United Way.
That's right.
Yes.
And you can go to our website and make a donation. It's super easy. You can volunteer with any of our agencies and be a part of that. And I think, you know, to your point around people who are homeless and the relationship aspect, homeless individuals are probably one of the most isolated and lonely people. And they see when people walk past them as if they were invisible. And that hurts at any point, you know, for anyone. So I think taking the time to understand and unpack those issues, looking at why, understanding why groups like United Way are an important part of that solution, but also individuals, and treating them with kindness and dignity is an important part. There was a great article recently in the paper about the kinds of things if you wanted to give to homeless individuals, and so we think,
yes,
think of socks.
That was wonderful.
And so those are all important aspects, and those are in the moment kind of things. But for the long term, the root causes, we have to really look at the preventative aspects of homelessness and how we do that. And so groups like United Way are really an important part of the way that we create that infrastructure and network in our community to support individuals.
Anita, Mohammed, I can see that you've both made a commitment to, in Mohammed's words, walk with the homeless. And I hope that other people will take up this cause as well. Thank you so much for joining me on Let the Quran Speak.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.